Thank you, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Authors. I have some wonderful young ladies here with me, and they wrote a book called As for Me and My House. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Everyone is not here. Everyone that's a part of this book, they're not here, but they're going to talk about the other ladies who are not here and tell you a little bit about the book. So I'm going to start with Leslie. Leslie, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your addition to the book?
Yeah, absolutely, Adele. Thank you so much for having us on. First and foremost, hi everyone. So, my name is Leslie Wright, and I am the compiler or the lead writer, the owner of this project, As for Me and My House, the anthology. And so, it's such an honor to be on the podcast on the show today. I'm located here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and there are six of us total in this book. And so, they are all over Illinois, North Carolina, you
Mm.
name it. And so it's been such a blessing, and you're going to hear from a few of them today and why this project was so special for them. So we're happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Ms. Norma, I'm going to go to you next.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Norma McLaughlin, owner and CEO of Chosen Pen Publishing and Chosen Path Christian Counseling. Um, I'm very excited about this particular project. When I was approached about it to write, to talk about my part of it and who helped onboard me and helped me in my past in order to be the success that I am today. So it is a very special book and very dear to my heart.
Okay. And yeah, excuse me, but I forget your name.
That's
So,
not a problem. It's not a common name. My name is Anissa Short, and thank you, Adele, again. As I already stated, we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this podcast and talk a little bit about this book that we have ventured in together. I live in the all-American city of Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been a resident here for now almost 7 years. Originally from Memphis, Tennessee, we moved here as a result of my husband's job. And Leslie is someone that I have been for maybe 2 years stalking, and then we became connected through Facebook. And of course, she's a coach of sorts, and of course, this book opportunity came about, and I thought it would be great to be a part of an anthology. That's something that I have not done ever in the past, and so it's been a great experience thus far.
wow. Well, ladies, I'm going to tell you first and foremost, I love the title, As for Me and My House. So, anybody seeing this book and seeing the title, they might not get what it's all about. So, can you just give us a brief synopsis about the book?
Yes. Well, the book was really birthed out of a pain and a cry out that I heard in the world in working with women in business. And
Hmm.
the number one thing that would go across my timeline or go across meetings and a trend, if you will, was Leslie, I need support. I don't get support from my friends, from my family. I started this business to help my home, but my home doesn't really help me. And so when I began to just pray about that, I said, Lord, what can I do to begin to answer this problem? And I took it to him as I do everything else. And he gave me this book in my sleep, as he's given most of my books to me. And then he began to just kind of flush it out. And he brought me to Joshua 24:15, which says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I said, okay, God, well, what are we going to do with that? Because it's such a meaty scripture. We can talk about so many different facets of that. For a little while there, I thought he was going to take me down the road of obedience and abundance.
Hmm.
And then he said, no, no, I don't want to go that way. I want us to write some laws. So for a minute there, the book was going to be kind of like a 10 commandments of the entrepreneur. But then I
Okay.
asked him to kind of dig with me a little deeper, and it became this wonderful anthology that you see here, where we're talking about onboarding the family and having a conversation about, we've started this business, now what? What does that look like for our family? How do we get friend, family, and inner circle support? What does that conversation look like? What that should that energy be? Who should you go to first, maybe, right? Should you talk to grandma and work your way in? What? How do I begin? How do I begin to even start this conversation? So that's the synopsis of the book.
Well, that's really great because when I think about entrepreneurship, being in business, and business people have a different mindset, if I should say, than the average person, because the average person, family, friends, and I've been doing business since I was 13 years old. But, when you talk about business, they're like, oh my God, no. I'm just lucky I had supportive parents that said, "Hey, you want to do business?" And so while I was a child, they supported me. But when I became an adult, they said, "You need to get a job and retire." And I thought, "Nah, I don't really want to do that." But I've worked several jobs. So, Anisha, right? Am I
Anissa.
Alyssa?
It rhymes with
So,
Melissa.
okay. So, can you tell me about your part in the book?
Yes, my part in the book is when first of all, let me say this: when Leslie gave us the title and the premise of what the direction that we were going to go with the book, I was a little dumbfounded. I was a little stuck, I have to admit, because like most who start a business, you automatically believe and feel in your heart of hearts that everybody that's the closest to you will be like your number one cheerleaders. And then you
Right.
find out that they look at you like a deer in headlights, like, excuse me,
You go to what?
so like most, I fell in that same category, and it varied. I had some people who said, well, great, that's good, and as if to say, let's see how long this gonna last.
Right.
Then you had the others that was like, why would you decide to do something like this with your background? Da 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 da. So it was kind of crazy. I talk about the venture when I started my business in 1999. For the first few years, I was very much kind of between two opinions because I was like questioning whether I did the right thing, that kind of thing. However, as time progressed, I thought about, and I told Leslie this later. I said, Leslie, I don't know if my direction is the direction you really want to go with this book. And so when I explained to her, I said it was conversations that I remembered as a child with my grandmother. That
Mm,
is what I often think about. She's been deceased now for over 14 years. And it's the conversations and the experiences that I had in observing, and not only observing and being in her space, but having conversations with her about her life and the things that she did. And my grandmother was an entrepreneur, but in her time and day, she was just the lady in the neighborhood that sold, but she
right.
ran a viable business from her home. So it was a lot of life lessons that I learned that I didn't just apply to my business, but just in my life in general as a woman and as a wife. But it was those things that I oftentimes referred to because I said, if grandmother in her day and time was able to create a life for herself and her family and to create some semblance of stability in light of the fact that even her family members sometimes thought she may not have made the right decision. But when she left us, she left us with a legacy. She left the family with not just great memories and life principles to apply to our own life, but we had tangible resources that the family could benefit from. And it had everything to do with the fact that she kept her faith and her family on the forefront. So my chapter is entitled A Legacy of Faith and Family.
As you were talking, first thing came to mind was Proverbs 31. She was the Proverbs 31 woman.
You know what?
And
Exactly. Because even on at her funeral, as one of the oldest grandchildren, I was the one to represent the grandchildren in the book, in her
Mhm.
eulogy, in her program. And that's what I used, various scriptures from the Proverbs 31 woman. And then the pastor ministered about my grandmother and used that very same reference about her.
Yeah, because that's what I heard when you were talking. I was like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, she's a Proverbs
that's
31
exactly
woman.
who grandmama was.
And that's why I said in the Bible, there are so many different passages
Absolutely.
about business
Absolutely.
that, if we go back into time, our forefathers were doing business before we even knew what business was, but that was a way of surviving. And so, Miss Norma, I'm going to turn to you. Tell us what prompted you and what your chapter was all about in the book.
Well, when Anissa, I think, was the first person who approached me about writing this, and I'm going, Anissa, I'm not sure what it is that I need to write. When she said onboarding, of course, I'm going, okay, now onboarding, what does that mean? And in my thought processes of who actually helped me
Mhm.
in my businesses, which I've had many down through the years. I'm probably the oldest one of this group, and I've participated in many different types of businesses. So my approach was from that. But it also is somewhat of a chronological approach because I talked about how my inner being was actually made from the very beginning with my grandparents as well, of how my grandparents taught me that you had to work for yourself, that there was no such thing as welfare. So in order for you to survive and do well, then you had to work. My grandmother and my grandparent, both my maternal and my paternal grandparents, owned their own land. They worked their own fields. They worked jobs. And so at the time, I had no idea that it was entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, I think Anissa and I were talking that we didn't realize that any of this was entrepreneurship until we started to write these stories, and how people in our past were really entrepreneurs, that they always had to be entrepreneurs. When we were out there selling groceries on the side of the road, and we had to do that to grow our fields ourselves, and we were chopping down wood and selling wood, we were still entrepreneurs in that right. So that my early beginnings was that of an entrepreneur. So that was what the premises that I started it, and continued that story throughout my teenage years, from all the way working on the school bus or whatever I did, and why. But all of that I did was still based on what my grandparents instilled in me. But it took me all the way to, my story just takes me through the end to where I am now. The title of my story is My Top Chef Guy. And
Mm.
my top chef guy, as it ends up, the story telling you, of course, is my husband, and who above him is the Holy Spirit. But that through my adult life and all these little business ventures that I started, he was always there. He always allowed me to do whatever it was that he wanted, that I felt like I needed to do. He never discouraged me. He never said I couldn't pay the little extra monies that I needed to do to start the various things that I was trying to do. He always called me the little side hustler. So I would, whatever it was, and I was always trying to make my own money. I mean, I always wanted my own money. And I think that was probably be my only way I knew to get it was to work. But we've been married 40 some years now. And in all of those ventures, he has always been there and been the person who's given me the support that I needed to do whatever it was I wanted to do. Right down to now, which is my biggest venture now, of course, is the publishing company and the coaching business.
Okay, okay. So he was your biggest supporter, your cheerleader, your fan.
Yes, he has been my biggest fan.
So, ladies, now, did you self-publish or did you go the traditional route?
Yeah, we have an amazing publisher by the name of Teresa Howard. She is based out in Texas, Women on a Mission. I have worked with her for several books to take me to international best-selling author. I love her and her team of people. They look over that book with a fine-tooth comb, and then they ensure that not only that it reaches households here in the U.S., but outside of the U.S. And I think that's why I continue to work with her. We share an international focus for literacy, empowerment, and leadership. And so she's like, we got to get this book out. Our last book reached London, and one of our authors is blowing it up in London. And to think that I had something to do with that is truly remarkable. So we moved that mission forward with trying to get this book now in Ireland and so many other places, and we're going to do it.
Yes, you are. I'm like excited because I sat back with Meet the Authors, and I do have a page on Facebook called Meet the Author. But I've been doing publishing since 2002, and I thought about it and I said, I don't really like the aspect publishing has changed so much. So I said I'll be a publishing consultant. But in the meantime, those individuals who have self-published, how are they getting their stuff out there? How are they getting the word out there? Who knows about them? So that's what made me decide to do the podcast, Meet the Authors, because people really need to know who the authors are behind these books that are being self-published. And I'm really excited about you guys' books because of the fact that it's biblically based, but we're talking about something that go back years and years ago before we were ever born. Um, Entrepreneurship, business. It's in the Bible. It's in the early parts of the okay, my mind just went blank here. But it's in the beginning of the Bible.
Yeah.
So
Beginning of time.
Mhm.
yes, so if it started in the beginning of the time, why aren't we doing it? You know, and it's so many of us, Miss Norma, I like what you said, your side hustle, because that's the way I looked at it, at one point in time, because I'm a licensed beautician as well. So I looked at beauticians. We used to be what I used to hear it called kitchen beauticians, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but we were
Mm-hmm.
doing our side
It's
hustles, but we
awesome.
were making our money.
That's
And
right.
so I really enjoyed the fact when Leslie said, "Oh, as for me and my house, but it's about entrepreneurship." I thought to myself, "Well, is it biblically based?" That's awesome that you took that the Lord gave you. As for me and my house, He took you to the Bible and had you to actually create an anthology with other women so that you can tell your stories about entrepreneurship. So,
Yes.
ladies, we're not going to be on here long, but I want you to tell our listening audience your experience as writers of this book.
Well, I'll go, girls. I'll go first. I'll go first. um, putting together anthologies for those who are watching the podcast and have always wanted to get into it is something I definitely recommend because you get an opportunity, like you've heard from Anissa and Norma, to call about people who have gone on. You get to bring them back, in essence. And with Anissa, I've been working with her. I said, bring me back into that room, sit me down with you and your grandma. I want to feel like I'm in the room eavesdropping on these conversations. And Norma, who, husband has been her number one fan. There are so many homes that are trying to figure this stuff out. How do I talk to my mom that I've started this business? How do I tell my husband that this is really my calling, not just something that I do for fun? What does that conversation look like? And so beyond sharing the stories of starting the businesses, the other thing that God was dealing with me was setting a standard, going into the new year, that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, but serving the Lord is going to look this way in our house. And that's okay if it's different. How do I communicate that not only to the world, but the people in my home as well? And so with me in writing, I'll come in between their chapters to talk about strategy. How do I sit down and how do I talk about this to some of the people that are in my household? How do I introduce this book as hopefully a book that will be discussed on New Year's Day at somebody's kitchen table?
Table,
I want
yes.
it to be not just one of the feel-good books that you read one time and you put it up. I want it to be a reference manual to get people through the hard conversations that they've been fearful to have, conversations that have been broken down in the past where maybe a fight ensued about business. I mean, people really go through it, in starting these businesses. And I think if we go back to our creator and ask him what did he say about entrepreneurship, it'll ease that conversation a little bit more. So I was really interested in the strategy in between their chapters, which you'll see, and I'm excited about adding that component to it.
Well, I'm going to say this. I would like a copy of that ebook. And we'll talk more about it offline.
Yes,
But I have an entrepreneurship book as well. Um, so I'm just thinking about collaborative of it. So
yes,
we'll talk offline about that.
let's
So
do
who
that.
wants to go next?
I'll go next. I'll go next. I am really excited about being able to participate in a capacity that honors the memory of my grandmother because my family, this is my maternal mother, grandmother, and on Christmas Day, Christmas dinner is at my mother's house. So with this book launching on Christmas Day, and Christmas Day was always at grandmother's house until the family got so big that the grandchildren were having children. So it
Hmm.
moved to my mother's house. So till this, since prior to her death up until now, Christmas is always at my mother's. So to be
Mm.
able to have the book launch on Christmas Day and know that I'll have all my aunts and first cousins and everybody there. And everybody will be purchasing their own copy, whether they want to or not, you know, whether they
They don't
I
know
did
it
not
yet,
know
but they
that.
gotta get.
Just didn't know that. Like,
that's what
look how God works. Though I did
I
not
know
know
they're
that.
like, you can buy a book and you can buy a book. So,
Before you get your
Absolutely,
plate, do you have your
exactly.
book?
Get your plate and buy your book.
and
Well,
buy your book.
I
I
had
like that.
I had my mom to read the manuscript right before I sent it. I said, Mom, now this is just a very rough draft because it's going to be edited, but I want you to read over it because it pertains to your mother. And so when she read it, she was like, oh my goodness, I hadn't even thought about Mama being an entrepreneur. And then she
Hmm.
began to say, I remember when Miss Such and Such would come over, and I was the one who used to write down Miss Such and Such's measurements. And her
Mm.
out in the shade tree and wait for Mama to get finished with everything she was due. She says, and I remember how grandmother would do all the alterations, and oftentimes she would save scraps of fabric, and she was very thrifty, and she would save pieces of fabrics, and then next thing you know, those pieces would resurface in an outfit for one of her grandchildren or something like that.
Mm.
And so she was like, I've never thought about Mama being an entrepreneur, but that's exactly what she was. And so what ends up happening as a result of me agreeing to be a part of this anthology and speaking with my mother, then she began to talk to me about how even both of my grandparents worked traditional jobs. This is what they did in addition to. So it confirms a message that I've been sharing as a business coach. I said everyone who has a W-2 need to have a home-based business. And
Absolutely.
my mom began to tell me how grandfather worked at the dairy farm, but then he sold at the markets on the weekends, the vegetables that they raised, and how grandmother worked as a domestic, but then she did sewing out of the house. I was like, they had a W-2 and a home-based business.
And a home-based business.
So that's been a joy for me. So to know that on Christmas Day, everybody will know, in addition to my mother, that I've been a part of a project such as this, and I can give honor to my grandmother, their mom, and their grandmother. Then that's gonna be a big plus. I can't wait.
No tears. No tears.
I know, right? Look,
I know, because when you mentioned about the fabrics being left over and how she made clothes for everybody, I mean, the first thing I thought about was my grandmother, because my grandmother left over fabrics. She used to quilt, so she would
Yes.
make quilts and what have you, and I mean, she would use just the different fabrics that she had. So I was like, oh my God, you're
right.
just bringing back memories for me.
Yeah, and then here's the thing for me with my grandmother, one, and I mentioned this in the book, is that she had an opportunity to work with a major retailer, major
Mm.
department store, and she declined the offer, which of course at that time it spoke volumes for a woman of color to have an opportunity like that. That spoke to her work ethic, her quality of her work. And I said, well, grandmother, you could have made more money. And she's like, yeah, but it would have taken me from my children. The hours would have not allowed me to be here for them, and that's my first priority. So again, even though she made the sacrifice, and that's what we have to realize, and even in business, a lot of times as you build your business, there are going to be some hard decisions and some sacrifice. And so that was one of the principles or life lessons I learned from her, that building a business is not going to be easy. You're going to have to make the hard decisions, but in the end it's going to work out. It's going to be in your favor.
I'm loving this. I'm just sitting back, like taking it all in, soaking it up, because I'm like, oh wow, because entrepreneurship is my passion. Um, years ago, God told me you are to raise up entrepreneurs, and so I've been doing that since I was 13 years old, and I'm just taking in. I'm glad you ladies wrote this book. So, Ms. Norma, tell us your story.
My story, I shouldn't follow Anissa because a lot of our stories are very similar. But as in part of this book, and I was talking about my top shelf guy because my story covers a number of shelves, with my grandparents being my bottom shelf. So that shelf is the one beginning. And talking about my grandparents and my grandmother and my father, one of the stories is I remember my grandmother would tell me that you always had to work. But my father also told me that one day I came home and wanted to, I had this family going to my school, and they didn't have anything. I just told my dad, they're poor, can I give them something? And he told me, no. I said, well,
Mm.
why not? He said, because there are jobs out there for everybody. There is something that everybody can do. There is no reason that anyone should go hungry. That there's no reason that a man should go hungry. And
Mm.
that was one of the scriptures that he always taught us, that a man should work by the sweat of his brow. And that
Exactly.
always stuck with me, that a man has to work. And
Mm-hmm.
then what I did, so I said, well, Dad, when the kids are coming to school hungry, the little child was in my class, and he said, well, you can take them some food. You can share your lunch with them. But whatever you do, you will never, ever take food from them or from anybody. You will always
Wow.
have your own, do your own, have your own, because you will always, provide for yourself. That was part of my bottom shelf, that you always work and provide for yourself, and you always try to do an honest day's labor. And then my next level of my shelf, we talked about my family, usually it's probably my husband's family and my sisters and brothers who formed that next level of my shelf, because they were the ones who also gave me a lot of encouragement. No matter what I did, wherever I went, whatever I tried to do, they were always supporting me. From my in-laws, my father, my sister, or my sisters, they were always there to give me support. So that was my next level of my shelf. We started a fish, we call Three Mac Fish, a restaurant. Again, I tell you, I had multiple hustles. But Three Mac Fish was with my sister-in-law, so we had three of us whose husbands were brothers, and we started that, and it was doing quite well. But then, of course, the Saudi Arabia war, and all the military, we're in the military town, so everybody had to leave. But they did encourage us to try to keep that open for a while, but we ended up having even to close that, even with their encouragement. And then my next level of shelves, it went on, my shelves go all the way up to my top shelf guy, which would be my husband, who offers all types of encouragement through whatever I have to do. And to step out, but always to step out in faith, pray about it, and be about it. If you can do it, then it's possible. And he would always say, all things are possible. Then
All
just do
things.
it. Just do it. If God has called you to it, then you have to do it. And one of his
Absolutely.
favorite things is, where God guides, he'll provide. Because I would always try to, where I'm gonna get my little extra money to do this little extra side hustle. And so we would always be able to come up with that. But in that process, that money would always come back, usually on the first sale or the first whatever. So we would say, okay, so this is another one of those things that God is guiding for us. But it also helped to bring the extra income into our household at that time. I was going away to school, working on my doctorate. So there was a one income family.
Mm-hmm.
Again, trying to improve myself. And during that time, I just did little odd jobs. I was at Virginia Tech at school. But then I was talking about my family, and his family were the ones who helped within that little time as well, because my mother-in-law would come by and feed him, or bring him out to feed him on Wednesday nights or whatever times. But she was one also who told me, I was saying, well, this is very encouraging, because we're coming from a two-income family going to a one-income family with side hustles. And she told me, this is my husband's mother, who I guess would be close to 90 years old now, if she had not passed, that what you're working towards something, what you're going to earn from what you're doing now is going to be more than 3 or 4 times of what you're doing now. So we'll take care of the home front. You go do what you need to do. So that was another inspiration for me as far as entrepreneurship was concerned. And in doing all of that, I was a teacher and taught entrepreneurship as well at Fayetteville State University, and taught several young students about entrepreneurship, took them to various conferences. We won prizes on entrepreneurship and going out, having them speak to other classes, to junior high, middle school students, starting programs with elementary school students. So now that I look back, I have forgotten about that part. I didn't even put it in the book.
I'm
But
smiling because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about, wow, because I know I've been an entrepreneur since I was a child. And I remember my sister loved to wear my clothes. And we laugh now every time I tell the story, but she loved to wear my clothes. And I was one that hated to say no. And so, because I hated to say no, in order for her to wear my clothes, I would charge her. So I charged her to wear my clothes. So, but every time she paid me, I would go out and buy more clothes because I know that she would ask me to wear my clothes. But
Mm.
because my mother taught us about banking, I would put my money in a savings account. So when I graduated high school, I had enough money to buy a car with because I saved my money as opposed to spending my money like she did. But she said she never thought about it. I mean, we're adults now and we do a lot of different businesses together. But she said she never thought about back then that she could actually had bought her own clothes with the money that she was paying me to rent my clothes. But anyway, I love this. I could talk on and on and on about entrepreneurship. Ladies, thank you so much for joining the Meet the Author podcast with me. Before we conclude this segment of Meet the Authors, can you tell our listening audience how they can get a copy of the book?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. And Adele, before we go, I think we have another author on too by the name of Kelly Haley. So if she's on, huge shout out. I'm not sure if she can jump on through her iPad, but the book is available from all of our authors. You know, the great thing about anthologies is that they have the power after the book comes out to feature it on their websites, their social media, bookstores, magazines, you name it. And so thank you again for being a part of our PR blitz, if you will, to let people know about the book. And the book will also be on Amazon as well, and just working on a lot of other places. We're looking into some biblical stores and places as well too. But Amazon is the best place to go.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it. You can get As for Me and My House from Amazon.com. I thank you, ladies, for joining me this evening. I am really excited. I can't wait to read the book myself because I love entrepreneurship. And like you, Miss Norma, I teach it as well. I've taught it for the colleges for over 20 some odd years. And I retired, but I still love it. So I still teach it
It's hard to
for the
get away
women
from it,
business.
isn't it, Dale?
It
You can't
is.
really escape it once it's in your blood. I used to describe it as catching a cold, you know, but this is the cold that you don't want to
So
ever
that never goes
be cured.
away.
I never want to be
That's
cured. This
that's
is what I want
true.
to keep. But Adele, also, I would be remiss, and oh my goodness, if I didn't mention the other authors, if I could really quickly.
Yes.
Roberta Little, who is in the book, Kelly Halley, Michelle Jones, Andrea C. Scott. Where would I be if I didn't have the rest of my authors? And so we just thank God for them contributing to the book, and you will love their chapters as well.
Okay, well, I'm excited. I just thank you guys so much for hopping on this evening and being a part of Meet the Authors.
Thank
And,
you.
um, you know, like I said earlier, I know your book is dropping out in December on Christmas Day, no less, but the podcast will air in January 2020. I said, what's Perfect Vision 2020. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. You ladies have a wonderful evening.
You too. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you.